Welcome to Morning Glory Farmstead. My name is Lolly, and this channel is all about gardening, animals, and nature. My granddaughter asked me why I was using the same footage over and over for my videos with these dogs, and I said I'm not. This is how they get every single time I go to open this gate for them to run. One of my granddaughters came over today to spend the entire day with me, and we had a blast, got a lot done, and had a good time doing it. It is so refreshing to see the flowers blooming. And look at all these buds. I know where the bees are about to be. Okay, today is actually going to be a little bit different because it's a combination of 2 days. Yesterday, one of my grandkids came over and helped me, and we spent some time on the leaf tiers that I had left from my green stalks, and we got all of the worm castings and the potting mix and everything put together, and we filled up all those tiers, so I'm going to show you some of that footage. But today, I am making my own potting mix. It's my first time, but y'all, I have a creative side, and you know I love to experiment and just see how things go. So when she came over, we took all of the bags that I had left of the potting mix, and we used up all of my bags of worm castings. We mixed everything together in the wheelbarrow, and then we took turns putting the potting mix into these tiers. And we also filled up the last of the original tiers that needed to be done, and she did a bang-up job. She was such a hard worker and actually was such a help. As they get older, it is so wonderful to see all the things that they can do to help out in the garden. She learned all about green stalks as far as why we have to fill it to the top with the potting mix and how that settles over time, but how we still need to leave a little bit of room for the water trays, and she had it down to a science by the time we were done. Now, she's helped me plant in green stalks before, but this is the first time that she's helped with some of the manual labor that goes into the prep work. But I didn't work her too hard. She had a lot of helpers today. And we took a few breaks to have some fun too. Now, if you guys watched my last video about the Mammoth GreenStalk Prep Day, you will have heard me mention that there were 18 tiers here that we needed to fill up with potting mix, but I also have 26 tiers that still have food in them, and those are going to have to be dealt with as well. Look at Donka doing tricks there. She jumped over those about 10 times, and that was the only time I could actually get it. Now, one of our breaks involved her filling up the little water fountains that I made with those solar kits for the hummingbirds. And as water was rolling off the table, George was right there to drink it. Any excuse to play in water. Now, after we made sure that all 18 tiers were full as far as the shovel goes, we went back around and took turns making sure there was plenty of dirt in the pockets and that it wasn't piled up around the center. If you guys have too much dirt in the center, the water trays are not going to fit, and if the water trays don't fit properly, then your tiers won't fit together properly either. So she's just kind of moving the dirt out into the pockets and making sure that they're all the way full to the top. One little trick that I showed her was how to take the water tray and put it over the hole and then kind of move it back and forth, shimmy it around a little bit just to make sure that it's going to fit. And that way you know you've got plenty of room for the water tray. So she kind of pushed it down and she's shaking it back and forth just a little bit with Farmer's help. So here's an example of what you want it to look like for the most part. You want it to be up to the top. You don't want it to look like this, okay? That's what it's going to end up looking like eventually anyway. So start like this, all the way to the top, okay? And once we got that done, she gave them all a good water. It was extremely windy this day. I cannot even tell you the battles that we had with the wind. Here's George. He's been playing in the water as usual. Took a 2-second break to dry off, and now he's back at it again. He is nonstop. But anyway, so we watered these just to kind of get the dirt to settle down so that it's not all going to blow out today, because it was just absolutely crazy windy. Every time we dumped a bag of potting mix out, the bag would blow all the way across to the other side of the yard. So all 18 tiers are ready to go, and they are just waiting to have seeds planted, and we will do that in the next video. Time to make my potting mix. Now, I have watched a lot of videos, I've done a lot of reading, and it kind of looks like the same thing across the board. You have your main ingredients for the potting mix. A lot of that is just peat moss and some type of soil, and so I've got that, and then I've got some other things that I'm going to mix in with it. So to me, it's like cooking up a meal. You've got your main ingredients, and then you're going to add all your garden seasonings, like your amendments, your compost, your fertilizer, things like that. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not measuring things out. The only thing that I'm going to be kind of a little more particular about is doing about 50% peat moss and 50% soil, but then just kind of winging it with the rest and eyeballing it. But I have a lot of other things still that I want to plant. I told you guys in my last video that I still have 4 green stalks that have food growing in them. So all of those need to be cleaned out and prepped again, and so I can use this potting mix that I'm making. I can't wait to see how it goes. I want to see if there really is any difference between what I buy at the store and what I've made. All right, let's get started. I'm going to put it in this plastic bin and mix it up. You guys have seen a lot of this in the garden haul that I did. So I've got my topsoil, okay, my peat moss, and those are the ones I'm going to mix about 50-50. And then I've got the perlite, vermiculite, fertilizer, and that's 2-2-2. So we've got a good ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then I'm also going to be using the organic compost that I got from GreenStalk. Remember, you guys can use my link and my code LOLLY10 to get $10 off your order, and that's going to be in the description box. All right, I got to get the dog's water bowl cleaned out and filled up before I get started, because I have a feeling this is going to take me a few minutes. There's not really a lot of rushing around and getting things done around here, because I have a lot of extra hands and helpers. All right, I'm adding my 3 bags of topsoil, and then I'm going to throw a little bit of the perlite in. And you guys check out my playlist. I've got a GreenStalk playlist and some basic gardening tips in a playlist, and it talks all about perlite, vermiculite, and all of those kinds of things. So I'm not going to go over that thoroughly here, because I've already done that in another video for you guys. All right, so I'm adding the perlite now, and that along with the peat moss are super dusty. In fact, it's so bad that I sprayed it immediately as it was coming out. I didn't dump it and then spray it. I have asthma, and I have to be really careful about inhaling stuff. But I will say it was a lot better doing it outside where there's more ventilation as opposed to doing it in the shop or the garage. Now, if it had been yesterday when it was super, super windy, there's no way I would have even been able to do this. All right, so a couple tips here. I will say that it took a lot of water to get this to calm down so that the dust wasn't blowing around in the air, but that was necessary for me. As soon as I turned it with that shovel at all, it was dry and blowing around again. It took a lot of water. Now, this does make it more difficult to mix up, okay? The more water I put in, the harder it was to mix it up. If you have a really good mask or something that you want to wear, that may be the better option. This is just the way I did it. There's always more than one way to do something, you guys. Now remember, I'm just kind of winging it visually, so I'm adding some more perlite, and then I'm going to add some organic compost and the fertilizer. All right, just a quick look at the compost. Just a quick note about these two boys. You know, I had George and Buster come in at the same time. George was almost dead, and Tossie, the little one right there, thought he was George's dad, never left his side, and they have been close ever since. All right, here is that fertilizer, which is balanced. It is the 222, and here's just a quick look at it. It does tell you on the back how much to use per square feet or something like that, but I'm just kind of dumping some in and hoping for the best. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of vermiculite. Not really sure that I even need it, but I've got it, so I'm going to add just a little bit. Here you can see the difference in the color. The fertilizer is lighter and the vermiculite is darker. Now here's where you can learn a lesson from me. This is like trying to make a cake in a bowl that's too small. So you got too many ingredients and it doesn't all fit in the bowl. So what I did was I brought over the wheelbarrow and I thought, well, let me scoop some of it out, and that way I'll have more room to work with it. But it was still difficult because the soil was in the bottom. I didn't layer it like I normally do. I'm not really sure why, because usually I layer things just to make it easier to mix up. And so ideally, it would have been great to have used like my kiddie pool or something that I know that I have. I don't think I realized the volume and how much it was actually going to make. So just keep that in mind to make sure that you have a container that's large enough to mix it properly. Now, it's still going to work out fine. It was just a little extra work for me. And like I said, it was wet, which made it a little bit harder as well. Now, as I took my gloves and went through it, I was able to get out any clumps and also remove any sticks or things like that that might have been in there. Here, I've got another tip for you. Make sure you wear longer gloves, because as I was mixing things by hand like this, I kept getting the soil inside my gloves and I had to keep taking them off to dump them out. Now, if you're going to use some kind of garden rake or something to mix it up and you're not going to do it this way, then you don't need to worry about it. And I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but it was a little uncomfortable. And so having some longer garden gloves would have been nice. As I was working in the plastic bin with the soil in the bottom, I thought, you know, it kind of makes sense just to go ahead and add a little bit more peat moss. I mean, that's the good thing about doing it yourself, is you can just do it whatever consistency or whatever makes sense to you. Now, I'm not going to say that after today it is completely done. I want to wait until it dries so I can really kind of run my fingers through it, see what the consistency feels like, and then decide if I need to add anything else to it. But I may not have to. It may be good to go as is, and I'll be able to go ahead and start using it to amend my green stalks that have food and maybe to fill some grow bags and things like that. So I'm really excited about it. You guys, don't be scared to get out there and try something you haven't done before. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? It just doesn't work quite as well as the rest. I mean, I've put the ingredients in here, and most seeds want to germinate. Most plants want to grow. Most flowers want to bloom. I can't see how this isn't going to work. Now, I'm not going to say 100% that I know it will, because you know I'm just experimenting, but I've got a lot of good stuff in here, and I'm also going to add some worm castings to it as soon as I get some more. I just ran out because I used them all in my tiers. So between the fertilizer, the compost, the worm castings, and just the growth medium itself, I feel like I'm going to be good to go here. All right, time to celebrate by loving on the dogs a little bit. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope I inspired you to try something new in your garden or do something a little bit differently. I'll see you real soon in the next video, and until then, y'all have a great couple of days.